Well, let's speak now to the Defence Secretary John Healey. Thank you so much for joining us here on the programme. We are here and at the site of the Nova Music Festival, where some 364 people were killed. Just give me your thoughts today, a year on since that horrific event on October 7.
Yes, our thoughts, like yours there, are for that horrifying Hamas terror attack a year ago today. 1,200 people massacred, hundreds seized as hostages. And our thoughts back in the UK here are very much with their families who still go through the agonies of those hostages that are still held by Hamas. And our thoughts are also with all those who lost loved ones, with the Jewish community across the world and our Jewish community here in the UK.
While I've been here, we've been hearing ongoing artillery fire. The helicopters are overhead, the drones are flying overhead. This war in Gaza continues to be fought, and there are still a lot of questions about the way in which the war is being prosecuted by Israel. We're just showing live images of Gaza at the moment, utterly under rubble at the moment, and 41,000 people have been killed. Just your views on how Israel continues to prosecute this war.
Yes, this is a day also that marks a deadly year of wider conflict, suffering, 41,000 Palestinian deaths. And the discussions that I've had with the Israeli Defense Minister, that we as a country have, like other allies, is to say to Israel, you must do more to reduce civilian casualties. You do have a right, of course, to defend yourself and go after your hostages, but it must be done within the bounds of international law, and more must be done to protect innocent civilian lives.
Of course, the UK has restricted some arms sales to Israel, but there are many who believe more should be done. Do you agree with the latest comments by President Macron that there needs to be an arms embargo on Israel when it comes to the war in Gaza?
No, we work a different system. We as a government don't supply anything directly to Israel, but where there are export licenses that have a clear risk that may breach international law, then we've suspended those licenses where they could affect the lives in Gaza. And I think the most important thing for all of us today is that we redouble our efforts. The Middle East simply can't afford another year like the last war. We must redouble our efforts now to reduce the risk of a wider war and escalation. We must secure a ceasefire in Lebanon that allows the UN plan for a separation zone between the Israelis and Lebanese Hezbollah to be put in place, and a ceasefire in Gaza so that we can get all of the hostages out, we can flood the area with aid, and we can start to see the sort of dialogue that could lead in the long term to a long-term settlement and peace, a two-state solution so the Palestinians do have their own state, and Israel and Israelis can live also in peace and security for the future too.
I mean, we've continued to see Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu defy any idea of a ceasefire. Just in the last week, that proposal by the US and France for a 21-day ceasefire. Do you think that President Biden, and the fact that every time he proposes something, Benjamin Netanyahu rejects it, is humiliated now, and America isn't using its full leverage over Israel?
I think President Biden and the US have displayed extraordinary leadership during this last year. And look, diplomacy is difficult. You sometimes get setbacks, but the fact that the UK, alongside the US and other nations in the United Nations itself, was arguing for this 21-day ceasefire in Lebanon, it's the sort of discussion, the work that we're doing behind the scenes as well as in public calls, and we have to redouble those efforts. We have to try and urge restraint on Israel, and we have to try and secure a ceasefire.
But is it? Yeah, but is it a great display of leadership, in your view, when, you know, this war has now expanded, exactly what President Biden said he didn't want? And now we've also seen over 1 million Lebanese displaced from their homes and the death toll continuing to rise there.
You're right. And our argument to Israel, the US argument to Israel and other international nations is, look, we understand that you, for the whole of the last year, every day have been suffering 100, 200 missiles a day from Lebanese Hezbollah. They must stop the missiles. They must withdraw. If they do that, then the Israelis must also cease fighting. And that gives the UN plan that's been on the table now for several months the chance for a separation zone, an end to the fighting, a long-term security, and in the end that is the way that the Lebanese families will be able to return to South Lebanon, and the 60,000 Israeli families will be able to return to their homes in northern Israel as well.
John Healey, thank you very much for joining us here on the programme.